Hi! In this presentation we will be applying cohesion, metaphor concept theory and lexical semantics to our chosen text, The Caged Bird by Angelou. The reasons we chose this text is because poetry is prone to have a dynamic array of interpretations to it, and theories often have interesting applications to poems as the meaning is more convoluted and up to interpretation. So I will be introducing lexical semantics. Now, lexical semantics has two parts to it. Lexical relationships are how words relate to each other, whereas semantics refer more to the meaning, the connotations behind each word. Now, Paul Simpson, in his book Stylistics, says that semantic information transmitted by a sentence may only partially explain its function. This is especially prominent when referring to the caged bird. Angelou uses different semantics and connotations when speaking about the ideas of the free and the caged bird. Free bird having more positive correlations behind it, caged bird having more negative correlations. And this affects how the reader would interpret and associate the poem with their own ideas. In The Caged Bird, the word bird has a fuzzy meaning. The image of a bird isn't concrete to every person. The poem, of course, doesn't have a fixed meaning. However, the adjectives free and caged each have respective connotations and association that affect how the poem could be read. At first, the free bird claims the sky and dips his wing into the orange sun rays, creating a semantic field of pleasantry and serenity, whilst the caged bird is stalking a narrow cage. Thus, the cage and the free birds become anatomical, polarising their experiences. The meaning of the poem also becomes interpretive with the use of synonymy, bars of rage and fearful trill. Not only do these synonymous words exaggerate the emotion in this poem, but it also personifies the caged bird by giving it sentience and emotion, meaning the caged bird identity becomes more ambiguous semantically.
Throughout the whole poem, the connotations of three words underlined in this stanza are close. First, let's look at the beginning. Bird, in all capitals, is the main body. Then is shouts, clipped, and finally tied. They are all verbs, and they are all actions made by the bird. These three words show the caged bird's plight to the forest. My question is, why Angelou uses synonymy for twice? They are bars of rage and the grave of dreams. For unfamiliar readers, what effect does this overly abstract description have?
In conclusion, through the use of various stylistic effects such as synonymy, xenonymy, and lexical fields, the author creates special effects as she internets a palpable web of graphic presentation, rich in visual imagery and its breadth of lexical realization. The emphasis on the bird's imprisonment gauges the attention of the reader and makes them empathize with its struggle for liberty. The enigmatic semantic relationships between the bird's plight and its vain efforts to gain freedom elicit intense emotion within the reader and pull them into the storyline.
In Oxford Concise Dictionary of Linguistics, cohesion is the connection between successive sentences in text and conversations. According to Michael Holiday, cohesion refers to the means, like in grammatical and lexical, of linking sentences into larger units. It is divided into several categories that will be mentioned to analyze the poem today. They are reference, substitution, and conjunction.
Reference is a vital component of cohesion. I have identified various instances of their usage in the poem. Firstly, the bird is the antecedent for all the pronouns used in the poem. The personal pronouns highlighted in green are examples of personal reference, while the determiner that is the only example of the usage of a demonstrative reference. There are no comparative references used. 6.73% of the poem is comprised of cohesive references. Moreover, every time a reference is used, it is done so in an anaphoric manner, as they refer back to a word used before in the text. The author's efficacious use of this type of cohesion ties up the text adroitly and forges inventive intersentential connections between the stanzas.
Cohesion has many categories. In the following screenshot, I have made them all detailed description in different colors. Regards to reference, words underlined in black and red. Substitution were in blue and conjunction were in green. The word his frequently appears, which vividly show the tragic situation of the bird trapped in a cage, which can generate a sense of substitution and let the readers experience the mood of the bird struggling for freedom.
To conclude our reading of cohesion on this text, cohesion or lack thereof is important to this text because it affects the way that we interpret it. Poetry is often more subtle with its meaning, so lack of use of cohesion means that the readers as individuals can interpret the poem differently. Now, a quote from Jefferies and McIntyre, whilst it is true that all texts are cohesive, the variability in the extent of cohesion is quite significant. So therefore, even if texts lack cohesion, that is especially important to how the writers would want us to interpret it. Just thought I'd add on to my commentary here. I didn't mention that the poem feels very personal in terms of cohesion, as highlighted by Spencer in the previous one. You can see a lot of substitution happening with the pronouns his, and this makes the poem feel very personal, and given the historical context behind the poem, it's very important.
In its purely linguistic sense, a metaphor is a rhetorical figure of speech that consciously compares two entities for some artistic or aesthetic purpose. Conceptual metaphor theory states that metaphor actually serve a greater purpose. Rather than a property of words, they can be construed as a property of concepts, which link more abstract concepts to more concrete ones in our minds. As Lakoff and Johnson suggest, a short way of grasping this view of metaphor is concept A is concept B, where concept A is the target domain and concept B is the source domain. Here, target refers to the more abstract, subjective concept and source to the more concrete, linguistic concept. As you can see by the diagram, by mapping between the source and target domains, we can understand how the constitutional conceptual elements correspond to each other and identify the linguistic representations of conceptual metaphors found in everyday language as common metaphors. Conceptual metaphors can be further classified into structural, orientational, and ontological metaphors according to their cognitive function. We now come to the first example for this section. In the poem Caged Bird by Maya Angelou, I have identified a total of 16 unique metaphors and 20 metaphors in total after counting for repetition. Moreover, 22 of the 38 lines contain metaphors in them. By interknitting such a rich variety and number of metaphors in the poem, Maya Angelou has elevated the aesthetics, allegory, and multiplicity of meaning in the poem. I now want to focus on a few select metaphors. Consider the following. I have selected these metaphors, namely, his wings are clipped, his feet are tied, and his bars of rage, and identified the conceptual metaphor as being bound in slavery. Here, slavery is the target domain, while being bound is the source domain. In the metaphors, wings being clipped and feet being tied, the idea of limbs being shackled or abused to restrain movement and thereby crushing the spirit of the bird are representations of the conceptual metaphor being bound in slavery. From this conceptual metaphor, we can recognize many other linguistic metaphors present in our life and literature, like being stuck in a rut, or it feels as though the wheels have come off, which represent lack of movement and having no real control over our fate. Or consider I am on shaky ground, which represents uncertainty of existential being through terrain.
Here are my examples of metaphor concept theory. It can be argued that the entire text is an extended metaphor with contextual clues that personify the cage bird. However, one of the most effective lines in my opinion is, "A caged bird stands on the grave of dreams." Question: in this line, what is the target domain and what is the source? The effect of this line is that it creates the image that the caged bird is beaten down and no longer lives for any of his personal dreams or aspirations. Not to get too deep, but they are gone and remain a memory. In this metaphor, some aspects of the grave were downplayed to suit the extract. Where the grave is used, it insinuates that the dreams have been long deceased, but they're still being held on to, and therefore the bird is still standing on it, and thus this creates the image of mourning. That means the effect of this metaphor is that the caged bird is more of a tragic, longing, wistful figure, in polarization with the free bird.
In the fourth test, Maya does not use words such as like and as to compare different concepts. This poem uses mature metaphors to compare the bird in a cage with the African Americans who fight for equality in the civil rights movement to further express a deeper meaning. When we are reading, contact the author's own writing background, we can slowly understand the author's good intentions.